It is now a good time to tell you one or two very memorable occasions and events remembered while I was employed by the American forces in Bad Cannstatt, near Stuttgart. Long before we heard the good news from the Australian Embassy during a colorful Christmas period, the entire staff and members of the American military were celebrating the festive season. The usual variety of good food and lots of alcohol. Whiskey, rum, a large selection of American and local wines, as well as generous amounts of special punch was available. Everybody was frolicking and celebrating Christmas. Some drinking heavily, others already drunk, a loud babble of talk and laughter filling the air. A typical Christmas time. I too shared a couple of glasses of Tennessee on the rocks and a very potent fruit punch. It might have been spiked, but I was not sure. Yet nobody seemed to worry about it, for, after all, it was Christmas. Happy to participate without someone supervising my actions for a change was a very delightful experience, for I never had any Christmas fun like this before, and whenever there was a chance to share a celebration of any kind, it was deliberately denied by those around me who opposed everything the world offered. After a little chat with everybody, I wished them all a very happy Christmas and a happy New Year before going home, knowing what I had done would be considered an unforgivable sin by Magda and her brothers and sisters. But I felt so happy about it. I wanted to leave a little early, like a few others wishing to spend quality time with their families, children, friends, and even girlfriends, and I was offered a bottle of red wine to take home. Soon I began to feel the side effects of the drinks I had consumed, content with the idea that I was completely in control. When the express train arrived at Stuttgart station, I sat down in my usual seat, feeling relaxed but also mildly intoxicated. I thought I could easily doze off until the station before mine. On average, train journeys like this used to take about an hour. I enjoyed the outside world through the windows and the blurred landscape in the distance, but soon after I found myself floating, just like the hang gliders, watching the landscape down below like the birds in the sky, just the same way as when flying in a light aircraft. But this was unusually different. There was no interior or the usual controls of an aircraft. It was a fairly slow process, and I thought I was either daydreaming or just dozing off and beginning to sleep. I experienced many flying dreams when I was a child and continued with this trend into my adult years. At first, this did not feel any different. I was floating at a considerable distance and noticed the train I was on speeding along below me. It stopped at certain stations, people alighting and others boarding. I watched many cars, buses, and trucks speeding away on the road. Villages, old houses belonging to antiquity, and tall modern buildings, while I continued to follow the train. I was enjoying the experience while wondering what it would be like if people were able to fly like this within actual physical reality. I felt lucky having such a wonderfully exciting dream. When I was a child and having these kinds of dreams, I wanted them to last longer, but upon waking, it had almost always been disappointing. I contemplated that this time my wonderful dream would also come to an end upon waking. However, my enjoyment was short-lived, especially when the train stopped, as I observed from a distance. There was a kind of panic and commotion at one of the stations, people rushing to and fro. Then I noticed an ambulance arriving, and several men rushing towards the compartment just in front of me. They carried a man on a stretcher and put him in the back of the ambulance. I fervently hoped that this person would recover, as I always wished the very best of things for everybody, because I always loved to see everybody happy. In this dream state, I said to myself that I would love to see this person closer. In that instant, I was in the ambulance, and took the whole experience as part of my dream. Due to his familiar looks, I thought that he was probably known to me. Instantaneously, I became aware of this sleeping person looking exactly like me, as in a mirror image. However, in a mirror one could only see a portion of oneself, whereas here it was a complete replica of my own image I was looking at. It was extraordinarily unusual to see one's own duplicate like this. I even wanted to get a little closer still and look at this exact replica of me. Nobody took any notice of me, and that alone was impossible. His hair, his eyebrows, his nose, and even the pores around his cheeks were perfectly replicated. Even his shirt, jacket, shoes, and briefcase were exactly the same as mine. In that instant I panicked, and thought, if this was not a replicate of me, who could it be? But I knew somehow in that very moment that it had to be me. Then I shouted, "What is happening to me? I don't want to dream any more. I want to wake up from this ridiculous situation." The leather briefcase he was holding in his hands surely shocked me, although I was unsure whether he was unconscious or sleeping. Two people in the ambulance placed an oxygen mask on his face and inserted a needle into his arm, while another cleaned his face. In that instant I felt a pull, which subsequently increased almost like a magnet, forcing me far away from there. I started to feel extraordinarily frustrated. Then I heard an extremely resonant male voice I took to be my invisible childhood friend saying, "Suren, my beloved friend, you cannot and will not get any closer to him." I began to shudder, but managed to ask, "Why?" I willed myself to wake up quickly from this nightmare. Perhaps it was the side effects of the alcohol I had consumed, and when I woke up, the nightmare would come to a sudden end. Besides, I really did not want to miss my station at Kirchheim Tech. But the voice repeated, "You cannot and will not get closer to him. You cannot wake up for a while yet, and will not. Now, enjoy the experience." But how could one enjoy it? I asked again why it was so. Was I dead? Was this not a dream? Although my memories might have become fragmented after all these years, I am sure that what I habitually wrote down in my diaries remains more precise and correct. I am utilizing those memories as jotted down all that time ago. I found myself floating higher into the air, soaring upwards. It felt like flying in a passenger aircraft, but the usual interior of any plane was not in evidence. Maybe they have kidnapped me, probably even drugged me, and are now taking me forcibly to Turkey, I thought. Again I heard the same resonant voice telling me, "No, my beloved friend, you are not within your coinciding body, and for a while you will not be able to, which means that it is not possible to return to your body right now. Even if you cannot accept this at this moment, it is better for you to relax and enjoy the experience." But how could I? How could one understand this unusual concept of returning to one's body? Panicking, I asked, "Am I dead?" Normally, I have been able to force myself to come out of my dreams and wake up at ease, but this time I was unable to do so. Obviously, my experience was to last a while, and I was going to wake up sometime later. So thinking, I tried to calm down, for I could not do anything else. Eventually, when my fear subsided, I found myself accelerating above the Earth's atmosphere. I have always enjoyed such flying dreams ever since my childhood. I could see the beautiful curvature of this wonderful world I was living in, delightful cloud cover, and the magnificent blue coloring of the air surrounding it. It was so vivid and so real. It made me forget all my troubles and fears. I soared upwards, becoming aware of the pitch-black sky with colorful stars, a multitude of star clusters, even the moon, as I remembered from when my brother and I were floating in one of our shared childhood dreams. I could see colorful nebulae and galaxies just the way astronomers described them. What I saw was three-dimensional. Some of the images I gazed upon resembled ones I saw in astronomy books, but most of the images in those books were in black and white, whereas what I was looking at were multicolored. I recalled how my brother and I borrowed our grandmother's thick glasses and turned them into a reasonably powerful telescope, observing the moon's craters and some of the stars. Later, we returned them back to her after reassembling, but what we experienced was beyond words. What I was experiencing in this unique dream sequence, however, was equally unforgettable. I wondered how my wife would react. Would she perhaps consider it once again as something presented by the devil? She was probably very familiar with that devil. Who knows? Suddenly, everything came to a halt, and what I was observing in utter realism started to blur. This sudden change in realism shocked me once more, and I found myself drifting in an endless tube, in appearance made of a material akin to multicolored stars, even perhaps the actual fabric of the universe, or cosmic dust. I cannot describe it, for it was beyond words. In fact, it was so unusual that I could not make any comparisons with stories told to us or books I had read throughout the years since my childhood. Then again, one could experience the strangest sensations in dreams. I asked again, was it a dream? I could not tell. This experience lasted for a time until everything stopped again, and a blur, just like a heavy mist, started to dissipate. Now I was in the middle of a place so unusual and with unfamiliar scenery. There was sunshine, but I could not see the sun, for everywhere the view was beautifully diffused. It was ideal for good photography. I was happy for my dream to continue like this, if I was not to wake up soon, and could wander around for a while, perhaps meeting some of the locals. The greenest grass I have ever seen underfoot extended for miles in all directions. A short time after, while turning around to see if there were any unusual features in the landscape, I noticed a beautiful purple and blue mountain range appearing in the distance. As the mist began to disappear, I could see water vapor coming out of the grassy ground, like in a beautiful springtime early in the morning, which I considered to be the most beautiful part of the day. Maybe my mind was creating the whole scenario. I became aware of a gentle flowing stream nearby, although I could not physically see it at the time. But as I walked towards its sounds, I noticed a couple of birds happily chirping and flying around. Then I literally heard sheep, cows, singing their unique songs. And I thought there must be some humans here, but how was I to react to their presence? And would I be able to communicate with them in an amicable way? Could one consider it to be a dream, for it was more than real? I walked on and heard the voices of people drawing closer. Now I was happier, for I knew I was not completely lost. If I was lost, I could ask for directions, or I could stay with them for a while, providing they were friendly. I had forgotten that this was a dream I could not easily get out of. Perhaps I needed not to concern myself about its authenticity any longer. Maybe I could learn a little about them, which would make my adventure worthwhile. However, if they were not friendly and had violent trends, hopefully I could run away. Sometimes in our dreams, we tend to embark on adventures where we feel the need to fight or flee. I hoped that this was going to be a nice one. I wondered again why I could not wake up from my dream when I saw my body being taken to a hospital and became aware of people walking in all directions. I suddenly found myself amidst people of a number of nationalities and races, but it did not feel like Germany. Many were dressed in colorful traditional costumes. There were adults and many children around me. One said, "Grüß Gott," another greeted me with "Merhaba," and one other said, "Good morning, friend." There were all kinds of languages spoken by the people, as if one was visiting Egyptian temple sites with tourists from different parts of the globe, but this was not Egypt, and the architecture looked different. It was not a place I had been before. I felt that this was an unbelievable dream, unless I was time-traveling, but here I was, and having a wonderful time. Probably I needed this experience. Everything was so colorful, beautiful, and most importantly, peaceful, unlike the ones we are normally accustomed to, but the languages spoken all sounded very familiar, and I could understand them. That was worrying me because I could not speak or understand them in normal circumstances. I was familiar with and spoke only German, French, English, Turkish, and some Armenian, but the other languages were not really familiar to me. The languages I spoke were not perfect at the time, although my command of English and French was better than German and Turkish. But my knowledge of Armenian was weak. At that stage of my life, I had learned some Hebrew, as my grandmother had encouraged me to, through my association with a number of Jewish friends. However, I was not familiar with those other languages, and was yet to learn about them as one of my interests. Yet here I was able to understand every single language spoken in this unusual dream. I again asked myself, was it really a dream? It was certainly very colorful and happy, whilst at the same time extremely illogical. While I was engrossed with the scenery and people, I forgot that I was no longer in the train going home. In fact, it did not matter anymore. Some people approached me, introducing themselves, and I was no longer alone, having a very distinct feeling of peace all around me. There was certainly nothing to worry about. I was content, and my usual and perhaps a little rebellious nature was not at all evident. This has been something I could hide skillfully most of the time from others, but in the end would suffer from complete dissatisfaction. Although I was very skeptical, I believe that I met my grandparents, who I did not know well. Perhaps they were, as remembered from my childhood dreams, for the grandparents I actually knew were different. Was it wishful thinking? This made me ponder further that my dream was completely illogical. Agavni was one of my grandmothers who lived a reasonably long time, and I immediately recognized her. She was healthy and happy, just the way I remembered her. I got to know her better when she returned from Beirut, Lebanon, where she lived for a while with her elder son, my other uncle. Sultana was the other grandmother whose glasses we had used when inventing our first telescope. She lived all alone with her elder son, my uncle Kirkor, a professional photographer who, despite his failing health before his passing, was now a very healthy and jolly character. According to my mother, he had been hit by a car a long time ago, and the doctors had to remove some of the muscle tissue from one of his forearms, but he had recovered quickly. Having seen my relatives, who had passed on, and others I did not know existed, I started to doubt, thinking that this environment I was in could be real. Then again, there was much more to learn, and so many things to discover. What if this was the reality, and that other existence where I lived on a daily basis was not? They explained certain concepts and ideas which were still far removed from my then limited comprehension of things. I realized that I did not know so many things about life and the universe, although the language presented no problems. Whatever they spoke, and whatever the language, I understood as if I was knowledgeable of it. Admittedly, the whole experience made me feel very suspicious about the realism of my then state. As far as I was concerned, this was still a beautiful dream sequence, and I was floating between the real and the unreal. I was unsure which to accept. Then I heard a resonant voice telling me that there was no need for any concern, as this was my only reality at this time, and it was something humanity's multi-belief systems would never accept, but there would come a time when they would all discover its correctness as scientifically proven. Was that once again my childhood friend about whom some others laughed whenever I made mention of him? As I matured, I learned to be more cautious in all my associations. Some other people came to the fore and spoke to me as if I had previously known them, trying to remind me of things and events I was not absolutely certain about and could not remember. Then one of them mentioned that when the time came, I would certainly remember the past as it was, but I wondered how could one remember a past which had never happened? If something cannot be remembered, how can it be real? On the other hand, do we remember everything from our past as we grow older? Do you remember the Christmas of 10 or 25 years ago in detail? Why is this so? How can we live or consider ourselves alive when we have no memories? However, this I remember so clearly. There were little children, some of whom were holding small pets. One had a cute piglet, another had a puppy, and yet another had a little lizard in their hands. They were obviously introducing them to me, and I was unsure whether this was a product of my own creative imagination. Yet the experience was so real that I felt completely confused about the reality. But do we not create our own realities, see what we want to see, and discard everything else? I patted those beautiful creatures to the children's joy. A young lady approached me, calling me her dear son. Then a young gentleman came closer and said, "Welcome back, dear one." I could not comprehend the familiarity, and thought that perhaps I had come to this place accidentally, and in truth the whole experience appeared to be too foreign. Was it perhaps, as I thought before, wishful thinking on my part? Had I perhaps jumped into a parallel world? I remember so clearly when they invited me for a welcome home feast, and declared that they would not accept no for an answer. This was at Christmas time anyway, and having accepted the invitation, if I was late home, I could tell Magda that I had been invited by friends whom I had not seen for a long time. That would be a genuine excuse. However, she would still be very upset about my thoughtlessness, for she would prefer to spend time with me just reading the Bible. I was offered a typical cup of English tea, complete with milk and sugar, presented in the most traditional way. It went down really well, with a beautiful chocolate sponge cake. I thoroughly enjoyed it, although I prefer to have chocolate in blocks. I was asked to relax a while, as I had come from a long way out somewhere, and they had a few things to speak of. That somewhere did not make any sense, yet I was not overly anxious about going home soon anyway, as we were not able to enjoy a social event, which everybody else around the world enjoyed at this time of year, for the witnesses considered it pagan, and we were not encouraged to take part in the absolutely sinful practices of the world, like celebrating Christmas, Easter, or birthdays. How strange it was not to celebrate the joy of coming to a wonderful world, and how strange not to praise our mother's ordeal in carrying us in their bodies for several months, from the time of conception to giving birth to us. It was like a great celebration here, and could one just relax in this peaceful environment? My words failed to express. Perhaps just the word love comes closer to describing it in some limited fashion. Then I said to one of these lovely people that probably it was time for me to wake up. They all looked somewhat puzzled, and after a short silence, I heard them say, as in a choir, "Not yet, dearest one, not yet. There is much to catch up, much to see and discover." Another voice told me that there was still a long time to go. I wondered what it was to see and discover. They spoke, and I listened, but their lips did not always move. It was a phenomenon I had rarely experienced, as when, for example, ventriloquist performed an act without moving his lips. However, this was new, although I was knowledgeable about telepathy, and when still a child was able to sense my brother's thoughts, and he could sense mine. This was totally different. I did not want to be a burden to anybody, so I thought of leaving these peaceful and loving people. Noticing my thoughts, they all exclaimed that I was always welcome, and they loved having my company. This started in me an intense sense of joy, while all were frolicking, and there was a feeling of happiness in the air. Everyone seemed so happy, as if their prodigal son had returned home, even if it was for a short period of time. I heard someone say that they did not worry about time on this side of existence. I was not going to worry about what was meant with this side of existence, as I was certain that it would be revealed soon enough. However, the whole event was so real to me, it almost convinced me that this was a physical reality. Everything I heard, said, or touched felt incredibly physical. I could not detect any violent thoughts, for what I felt were thoughts of acceptance and unconditional love. There were no religious thoughts to be detected either, and I was not going to question it. All their expressions were pleasant and kind. Interestingly also, I was sure that those people of the kindest kind in turn felt my thoughts towards them. I did not and could not worry about anything other than observe, discover, and enjoy the occasion. A wise person approached me, full of friendly smiles, and in a very regal manner said, "We would like to take you to one of our educational libraries, which in some circles are probably known to you as the halls of learning." He gave me the impression of being an educator, and I could easily understand what libraries would be like, but I was unfamiliar with the concept, the halls of learning, for until then I had never heard the term, and was very curious. Maybe, I thought, there were higher educational institutions like the universities we are familiar with. Was it perhaps a place like a lecture hall? Hopefully, I was not offending anybody by thinking this way. I heard the person accompanying me say, "Do not concern yourself much for now. You will have plenty of opportunities to rediscover things." Things were indeed becoming more intriguing and more interesting. As we wandered on, I noticed strange-looking buildings displaying architectural excellence, without roads and highways we are accustomed to seeing. I became aware of an endless number of tubular structures gloriously shining under the diffused light. We stood in front of an opening, which reminded me of a gate unlike the ones we are familiar with on Earth. Imagine the end of a tunnel suddenly appearing in mid-air in front of you, which obviously extended into distances far. This unusual entry looked like it was made of multicolored lights, yet solid to touch, and, in the same time, so soft that one could not accidentally hit oneself and get hurt. It was certainly very inviting for the adventurer. I thought something as wonderful like this could probably only happen in one's dreams, and again, I was going to enjoy it nevertheless. We traveled in this unique tubular structure for a while, never sitting on anything, instead floating within it, twirling, turning. It was delightful and exciting, and the sensation was unexplainable. It felt as if we were gliding on a cushion of air. I was shown how everything had originated within this and other universes, how everything came to being, from the smallest particles to complex organisms, but everything was based upon a variety of energy forms. I wondered if one could make a theoretic suggestion for the scientifically minded to ponder upon. Maybe some quantum physicists could be persuaded along those lines, or were they already knowledgeable about this? The colors I observed while floating within the tubular structures of light, and the open spaces wherein were displayed galaxies, star clusters, and worlds, presented a magnificence of incandescent lights. They were so numerous and very hard to describe within the limited vocabulary of any known language upon earth. I can therefore make mention of only a few in a very limited fashion. I found the formation of those galaxies and planets to be exciting to watch, but the development of life, particularly the intelligent kind on those worlds, from one-celled existences to more complex ones, like the humanity we know of, topped it all. I have been shown how the thought universe gave birth to the development of different energies, affecting the alignment of building blocks to form the material universes. There was mention of different mechanics and principles, but my attention was directed to the magnificence during my journey. Those universes were in pockets, or parallels, displaying either similarities or opposites depending on the polarity of the original building blocks. However, without the groundwork it was very difficult to understand the complexities of cosmology. I was told that there were so many things unknown on my world, and the importance of open-mindedness was emphasized. I concluded that I was not the only one needing to learn so much more, and indeed mankind needed to accept that possibilities existed. Many of the worlds in different regions of galaxies were inhabited with different modes of evolvement and history. There were worlds which were abandoned due to various circumstances, and many of the original dwellers of those planets have migrated to distant worlds to continue with their lives, which could explain the existence of so many races on Earth. Some of the other recesses of the universes were considered, and how those humanities occupying other worlds have developed and evolved was a subject of intrigue. It was equally exciting to discover the existence of connections amongst the parallels of those multitudes of other universes and life-generating components similar to black holes, as also observed by Earth's scientists. There were highly and scientifically advanced people, capable of producing elements to create the right environment where an organic automatons could be produced. But it was a science the world was not ready to accept yet. That was still to come, when humanity was able to produce robotics. There were also many advanced people traversing within the intergalactic continuum, and beyond, which known humanity was yet to discover. I was shown groups of peaceful and wonderfully colorful people living and working on extraordinary projects in manufactured worlds, unusual planetary existences, and their unique populations, lifestyles, and standards. I was told that they did not follow any particular plan, but their own creative prowess. There were inventors, planners, and doers. The known universe had its secrets as far as Earth was concerned, and humanity was creating and reinventing itself. Once they discovered healthier lifestyles through their own sciences and started living in peace with each other, not as separate nations, but as a whole human family, and their lives normalized to a decent amount of years, meaning hundreds of years, for genetically they were capable of doing so, they would achieve more creative and inventive states of evolvement. One of the culprits of humanity's downfall was due to their lifespan being cut shorter than necessary. When they lived healthily for a longer time, they would comprehend the complex processes of life's continuity in other dimensions of the multi-universe, knowing that they are primarily energy and thought. Once humanity was evolved as originally envisaged, they were to discover some of the secrets of the universe, and many truths would become available within their own physiognomic makeup. They would then be assisted by others living in more advanced states to perfect their knowledge. However, for now they needed to wake up to reality where no man-made religion existed. They would then see all their experiences as part of their development, and the futility of their current fighting efforts would be understood. Only then would they be able to stop repeating their history. Only then would they understand that there was no death, and it was all but a great continuum. The machinery of the universe was always evolving. It was breathing, viable, and long-lasting. It was always changing, and the awareness of all living beings were realized, no matter what level of evolvement they presented. Wherever they were within the material universe, or at whatever distance from one another, there was always energy and movement, and their existence was always aware, always conscious, on an individual basis. An amoeba or cat, bacteria or plant, and the human is identified by a type of consciousness which develops the state of energy needed for the creation of necessary ingredients, from atomic units to gigantic planets where life begins, will always be present. Consciousness equates to being alive, no matter in what form or dimension. All human-like existences have their reality dreams. By thought alone, they can influence the energy formations which make quarks, thus protons, and other important elements. They can be activated by the energy which makes thoughts possible. Atoms and molecules can be affected by the same. By thought alone, the right environment can be created, wherein those molecules can be perfected and adaptability programming effected. There is an intelligent awareness that always is and continues to evolve throughout the cosmos, and therefore it is important to consider the reality of thought energy. However, that intelligence awareness is not identifiable by concept of God, and certainly not an individual God as understood. It is something that all movement, all energy, and all awareness shares. It is humanity's absolute puzzle, currently being considered as the unknowable darkness and emptiness which humans are incapable of seeing because of the lack of much-needed wisdom. But that emptiness is not empty. All aspects of physical reality, from one-celled creations to a huge variety of complexities, have originally been caused to be and made possible by the same energy which started the creation of the base materials utilized for evolutionary processes. Every human thought is vitally important for each human being, contains the source, and therefore the ability to will and command the elements like magnetic attractors and start a chain reaction. When, however, humans stop their current trends of destructive kind, the way they have been conditioned to believe, and start a positive way of thinking, they will be able to discover the truth and learn that the lives they have lived until now have been the result of their own negatively conditioned thought patterns. They are not the byproduct of their belief systems, which they have been forced to accept throughout their long history. Under the dictates of self-made religious or cult leaders, they have been controlled, and all their thoughts altered to believe in myths for eons. Man has always had the ability to improve his ways and discover new ones to advance in science and medicine. Sadly, however, by negative thought, they have blinded themselves, therefore repeating their history. Humanity's evolvement is therefore very slow. Thought energy, together with the energy of love, which binds, is positive and capable of building, not destroying, and can create much of what mankind needs. Some groups of mankind are beginning to grasp the truths considered herein, and will discover that they are the engineers of the life they live, not the way their religious leaders have been indoctrinating them. It was further explained, what is being told to you may not be considered right by your religions or cults, but those who have been adhering to dogma and religious practices have dulled their minds and have been unable to think for themselves. Here is a thought, matter and antimatter, thought and antithought. Now put them in action in equal or proportionate parts, and consider that you may be the creators of your lives. Just think about this for a moment, and remember there is not only one source of intelligence in the known universe, because all intelligences, including the ones on Earth, are united in oneness. Call this a multifaceted or multidimensional unity of intelligence. Those who speak of love do not always practice love. You have certainly heard of the energy of supreme love and the effects of self-love without being selfish. This love leads to rebuilding your entire being, and even your entire bodies, as well as updating your DNA programming for the better. More will be discovered concerning this, but progress will not be fast enough. Generations to come will find a more scientifically viable word for it. Attractor energy, binding energy, and others. No matter how long or short your stay may be on Earth due to your current circumstances in the world, you may think that the real you will never change, but you are being urged to consider that once you willingly commit yourselves to get to know who truly is the real you, only then can you begin to make the necessary changes in your lives. When every individual allows the alterations in their thought patterns, then the whole world will change for the better. This is a message to humanity. It is completely up to you to live happier lives or to become completely miserable, to prolong your lives in good health or prolong your endless sufferings. When speaking of the cosmos, or ourselves, we can declare that all is but a unity, and we need to feel it deep within our core. We need to look at all things surrounding us differently, from singular atoms to more complex molecules, to the food we consume, even the world upon which we live. Perhaps it is an excellent idea to look within first, instead of seeking help from an exterior and elusive source of any kind. Remember, everything in nature has a core, which is the aware self, just like you. When you are able to consciously connect with it, not surrounding it with pessimism and negativity, but with absolute positive energy, increasing your unconditional love therein, nothing in the universe can stop you inventing, creating, and healing. This is where your universal throne is set, and your kingdom is. This is where your real essence dwells, beyond you, yet within you. Can you feel your own core, your own center of being? This may be what you have been endlessly searching for, but were unable to name it until now. You might have been looking for it in all the wrong places. Remember, when there is light, you can see your shadow, and it is always attached to you. It imitates everything you do. Whenever your center of operations decides to do anything, your body obeys the commands. There is an observable pattern within all life circumstances surrounding us. Love is the light you need to see your own inner core, your aware self, your center, and that is indeed your seat in the universe. You are like the sun in the center, and are not just your body. You are like the stars you admire at night amongst multitudes of other stars, galaxies, and universes. Do not constantly expect disasters in your world, as many have been doing for centuries, and start believing that all good things will happen. Remember, you are the controller and creator of your thoughts. Fill your world with positive thoughts, and your world will be rich with enlightenment. It will never be like the belief systems or fanatical movements and religious institutions trying to convince you to accept them. Do not fall into the ignorant ways, but become like your masters of great thought. Listen to your scientists, for if they were not in touch with their own cores and the central control system in the universe, there would be no progression, no discoveries, no inventions, and you would still be groping in dark. You need to find your real self in the real world. Do not consider the belief systems of old as being completely wrong either, for there is always something worthwhile to find in them. But let them not stop your evolvement. Do not just dream, do it. Walk courageously and trust your inner self, where your core is, and know that you are part of a greater scheme of things. You are the children of the universe, although you are the tiniest part of many other worlds, stars and galaxies which you are beginning to become aware of. You are forever. Do not divide humanity, for every one of you is the same. Do not judge each other, whether black or white, rich or poor, intelligent or ignorant, because you all emanate from the same source. When you eat your food, you do so with delight. Now try to eat it with your hands and taste the difference between eating with cutlery and with your fingers, and tell me the truth. Which method is tastier? Why? It is because you are transferring the energy of love directly to the food you are enjoying. There are many examples of this, and you can discover it within your daily lives and interaction with others of your kind. This is the closeness you need to feel when helping yourselves to heal and even become wealthier. This energy of love is the way you can create peace amongst yourselves. You need to stop warring your hatreds and resentfulness and concentrate more on your loving deeds. You need to stop your differences, even if it means giving up your beliefs, or at least accept all others without forcing your own religious ideals on them, and the light will shine. Buddha says, we are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we think. When the mind is pure, joy follows like a shadow that never leaves. One can never know what comes after, and only guess what tomorrow will bring. No one upon this wonderful world is completely knowledgeable about what it was like before, and all seem to have only dreams, theories, and imagination. Let us not forget that these are some of our characteristics, and they have a source and a beginning. If one would attempt to talk about what happens in reality, one would have a series of questions, and rightly so, just to know more about what reality is. What really happens when we pass from one reality and dimension into another reality and dimension unceasingly, even at times thinking that all our experiences are like the delusional experiences of a drunkard. You might consider your experiences as being groundless imaginings, believing you might one day wake up into everything new. What if you are still dreaming of a reality dream, and so writing down your story for others to read? But who will take note of them while they are all symbolically engaged in writing their own dreams down? Can those recorded memories you create open new vistas on the pathway towards all-important discovery? Can it be true that you simply live to die, and all is lost? What does your logical mind tell you? What does your conscious awareness show? Listen to your children when they tell you all about their adventures before being born, and do not consider them as worthless and childish imaginings, for you may be missing a few vital clues about certain truths. Furthermore, do you really need anything or anybody visible or invisible and of a higher echelon to dictate and guide you, to control your entire being like an automaton? Remember, you are continually inspired from a positive source, but your own negative thoughts and wishes can attract the negative source also. Therefore, if you want all evil in the world to disappear, aim to consider everything positive and wholesome. Take note that what is herein considered is vitally important when contemplating upon the future of men. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, 1770 to 1831, says, "Ultimate truth is slowly uncovered through the unfolding evolution of the history of ideas." We are being recorded within the fabric of the universe, where is and is not, being and not being, up and down are all contained. Remember Shakespeare's famous words? To be or not to be, that is the question. We are the matter and the antimatter. We are thrust into an explosion, an implosion of activity and actuality in one. After our departure from the material illusion we call physical life, the world of the mind begins, and it is where dreams become realities. Compare it with your reality dreams within your physicality spectrum. Know that life is a cycle, a dance unending, with all its new beginnings. So many things have been shown and spoken about during this unusual outing, and so many wonderful ideas considered. Some of them were a little outlandish, but beautiful, and many others promising that the future was going to be very interesting. However, as time passed, I still wanted to wake up from what I considered to be my dream, or else my mind playing tricks on me due to the influence of alcohol. This experience was so significant and unforgettable. Suddenly, I was once again told that my desire to wake up was not going to be fulfilled for a while yet. I was a little anxious, but no longer frightened. One thing was certain, that we are only a small part of the greater picture, no matter how insignificant our role may be. Then I concentrated on having died, and that this was the so-called afterlife. But again I was told it was not the case. Besides, there was still so much to learn and more to see. For a brief moment, I thought I was in a utopian world. I was meeting other people and also being introduced to a greater number of different races, including those original dwellers on planet Earth long before the introduction of the known humanity. I was no longer worried about waking up, work, education, or anything else for a while. It was like an unplanned holiday. There were so many things to concentrate on that there was no time for anything else. In fact, during our journey through life, every one of us encounters many things, denials and change, but we need to realize that each has its own message to learn from. One of the great philosophers humankind had in the distant past was Socrates, circa 470 to 399 BC, who said, "The only thing I know is that I know nothing." When I finally, reluctantly woke up from my long-lasting dream, I found myself in an icy, cold place with very little light. Unsure where I was, I found myself lying on a bed with wheels. Some white material was loosely covering me, which I took to be bedding. I felt the urge to lift myself and sit up. Instantly I noticed that I was surrounded with many storage compartments. In the minimal amount of light available, one could only interpret what I was looking at was a cold room. Or maybe what I thought I was seeing was not there. I can never forget that thin metal piece attached to one of my toes. I felt so cold and frozen, waiting for a lengthy period of time. At first I wondered if this was the continuation of my dream. Then a young lady in a nurse's uniform entered, carrying a tray full of things. I was so excited to see a living soul, and shouted, "Hello, miss. It is very dark and cold here. Could I have some water, please?" That experience was so thoroughly etched in my mind. I can never forget how that poor girl yelled in absolute fear as she ran towards the door, dropping her tray. She was shouting, "He came alive! He came alive!" Suddenly, awful smells filled the room, which I thought came from what had been spilt on the floor. Soon after, people who I took to be hospital staff and doctors rushed into the room, attaching wires and tubes all around my body, and hastily took me to another one, asking me so many questions, such as if I knew where I was, what the date was, and how I felt. My temperature, blood pressure, heart rate, and breathing was normalized. One doctor approached me while I was sipping on a cold glass of water, telling me I had been in a coma following severe alcohol-related blood poisoning. It did not make any sense at first, but it became clearer when they took me to a ward for observation for a day or so and offered me some food. I had been comatose for a considerable length of time, and they explained all about how I was looked after. They were so happy that I was not brain damaged. I was relieved, but saddened about causing unnecessary concern. It was no longer Christmas. They called Magda to tell her the good news. But when she came with one of the witness brothers, she told me how worried she was in case they had transfused me with blood. She and that brother advised me that this is what happens when one shares a pagan practice with the worldly and godless people. She had apparently visited me during my hospitalization twice before, and was praying to Jehovah day and night. It became crystal clear that I was no longer in a dream state. However, I can never forget my unique experience, and the most interesting issue here was that I was under no influence of stories which some might consider me having. This storyline, or other people's experiences, has never interested me before. Albert Camus, 1913 to 1960, says, "The absurd is born of the confrontation between human need and the unreasonable silence of the world."